So most Category 2 boards ran for a maximum of 2 hours. Mine ran for 9 because I cross-examined everybody.
I got so much questions too.
I wanted them to be. I wanted to hold them accountable.
Clarify yourself. Oh yeah.
Explain why you said this.
That's so good.
I dragged them through a 9-hour.
What's an aspect of intelligent work that you believe that is misrepresented in movies or by the media of intelligence work?
That's easy.
Go ahead.
That's it. The misrepresentation is that if you tell people that you're in intelligence work or that you are in the intelligence community, everyone assumes that you're a spy.
That's so true. That's so true.
Community.
Nice.
Matter of fact, when I was working as a contractor a few years ago, and one of my fellow instructors saw my name, and he asked me, he says, Dr. Lockwood, are you the Lockwood of Lamp fame?
That's so awesome.
Are you the Lockwood of Lamp fame?
Goddamn right.
I said, yeah. I said, yes, I'm the Lockwood who invented lamp.
Wow.
And so, yes, that has given me arguably a worldwide reputation saying this. Mm-hmm. So it's a fascinating thing. Yeah, and our viewers need to remember one thing. Whenever you are looking at various sources, no matter where the source is, always consider the source. Mm-hmm. What are they saying and why are they saying it? What part of the political spectrum are they representing? And you have to take it from there. And always remember also that this is constant stream of information, which is never finalized. You don't really realize the full truth.
So, welcome back to Rumbling Facts Podcast, where critical thinking meets uncomfortable truth for real fucking growth, people. This is your number one destination for challenging the status quo, exposing the untold, and leveling up your mindset. I'm your host, DJ Retsam, a rapper with over 220,000 streams in the past year. It's fucking amazing. So, if it's the music that got you here, or it's the podcast, subscribe, people, because this is all about transformation, real, raw, and revolutionary. And this podcast is not about the fucking comfortable. It's about the thinkers, the seekers. Whether it's the music or the podcast, it all comes down to growing all together and having an amazing journey. And before I get into this amazing conversation today, I want to say there are people in this life that serve quietly, think critically, and shape the world without needing a fucking applause. To me, those are some of the biggest fucking heroes in this life, and today we're honored to sit down with one of them. Jonathan Lockwood is a retired U.S. Army intelligence colonel with decades of frontline experience in national security, strategic intelligence, and Russian affairs. He's also a former GS-15 at the Department of Homeland Security, where he played a key role in shaping the U.S. policy, intelligence analyst, and globe threat response. He holds a PhD and MA in International Affairs focused on Russia, a master in strategic intelligence, and degrees in history and psychology. This isn't someone who just studied the game. He's helped write the fucking playbook, people. He's also an author of groundbreaking works like The Russian View of U.S. Strategy and the Lockwood Analytical Method for Prediction, called LAMP. Both available on Amazon, people. This episode is more than a conversation. It's a rare insight into a world of intelligence, geopolitics, and strategic thinking. Welcome to the show, Jonathan Lockwood. How you doing?
Doing just fine. You know, after an introduction like that, I can hardly wait to hear what I'm going to say.
I often guess say something like that. They're like, goddamn, okay, you didn't just do a little intro. So I appreciate that. Is there something that inspired you to pursue a career in national security and intelligence?
Wow. Okay. Now, in order to get the full train, sort of like, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version somewhat,
Yeah.
so I don't completely, because otherwise, I have Asperger's syndrome. Truth and tale. I didn't discover that until I was officially diagnosed a couple of years ago.
Wow.
And what Asperger, because I'm on the spectrum, like people like Elon Musk and Greta Thunberg, but Asperger's, I must alert, it manifests itself differently in different people, depending on where they are on the spectrum.
Okay.
Now, in my particular case, it gives me, what it does is it gives me a very high IQ, a quirky personality, and it tend to very hyper focused. My wife is used to that. She knows how to compensate.
Mm-hmm.
She's arguably more intelligent than I am, and a higher IQ. A voracious reader. She has read nearly 70,000 books by her estimate in a lifetime, and she can speed read. And so she's kind of like my hidden resource. So we're like two. One friend of ours has said we're like two swords sharpening each other.
Yeah,
so we have some fascinating conversations.
for sure.
But in any case, my interest in started off when I was about let's say 13. A friend of mine down the street invited me over to his house to play a war game that he had purchased called The Battle of the Bulge,
Okay.
produced by the Avalon Hill Game Company. This is in 1968. I was fascinated by the game, and then he had other games, and so I began purchasing and playing more games and studying military history behind the games.
Okay, yeah.
And then that broadened out into study of military history and history in general. And then because of the wargaming aspect, I became interested in the intelligence aspects. How do you tell what the other side is going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And so I began developing an interest in becoming an intelligence officer.
Wow.
In high school. And
that's incredible. Normally in high school, nobody knows what fuck we're gonna do. Wow.
I was one of my high school classmates at my 10-year reunion said that I was voted the least changed, which is considered a big honor in my high school. Least changed, because she said that I was the only one who knew what I wanted to become, and went ahead and did it.
Wow.
And it just had that kind of focus.
It seems like you're addicted to knowledge as well right there, because when you were a kid, you're playing this game and you're like, there's so much more to learn about this, and you wanted more and more. And I realized when I was young that knowledge is such a drug to the highest degree, because after you learn something and you know the truth of something, man, the adrenaline of knowing truth there and knowledge is incredible. And you were very curious when you were a kid to really explore it right away, and you were like, okay, this is it. Wow.
You have a very good grasp of my background, in that my parents, they knew that I was different.
Yeah.
But they accepted me exactly the way I was. They didn't try to stamp me into a mold. They let me
give you a pill.
Right. They didn't drug me. They didn't try to force me into a mold. They gave me. I had all sorts of books, and when I had recovered from pneumonia, which I'd had for 6 weeks when I was about 7, and my mother, after I managed to recover, she asked me what I wanted Santa Claus to bring me for Christmas. And I had watched this one cartoon where I saw, this cartoon where the characters had bought a chemistry set, and showed how the chemistry set was. And so I said, a chemistry set? I didn't realize that I had a blank check for Christmas. We would have gotten anything I asked for. So they got me a chemistry set. Wow. And other things, and just to help anything that would develop my mind and enable me to read and study. And my teachers were the same way. I went to a Missouri Synod Lutheran Church school.
Okay.
It still exists. It's in St. Petersburg, Florida, Grace Lutheran Church. And the teachers there, again, they realized that I was different, and they, again, rewarded me with more difficult problems.
Yeah.
It was just amazing. I learned to love school, I could not imagine not being in school.
Same here. Same here.
And so from starting at the age of 3, I was in school, went through, and eventually in high school, I wanted to become an Army intelligence officer, and I wanted to go to West Point, and so I got that. I applied for. I had 2 things actually. I had a 4-year Army ROTC scholarship, and I had an appointment to West Point, so I chose West Point. So, but then I discovered, to my shock, I thought I was all prepared, but I had I had all the advanced knowledge and stuff, and thought I was all set. But what was interesting is because of I did not realize that I had Asperger's syndrome. That produces a nonconformist personality. West Point hates nonconformists. And I did not realize
when society in general.
In society in general,
they just want you to be a pawn. So right when you're different, for sure.
Yeah, exactly, and I've encountered that pattern my entire life. Really.
Same here, because I'm OCD. So and I didn't realize it till I'm 30. So that's only 5 years ago. So all my life I was just confused why I was different.
Exactly. I'm not quite OCD. I have my voice teacher in Germany told me that I had an almost inhuman ability to focus.
Wow.
So, which I was able to do solos and things like that without that much effort.
Tunnel vision on something.
Yeah. When I sang a solo, basically it was only I existed, the song existed, and God existed.
That's it.
That's it. Yeah. And so it didn't matter who was in front of me. I just focused on that.
Wow.
So it can produce a very quirky, hyper-focused personality. And my best friends are used to that, and they accept me for it. And the rest of the world, well, they just
they were surprised.
Here I am.
I really find it incredible what your parents did. Saw that you were in search of knowledge and search of more, and
they just kept feeding that.
Yeah, they fed you, and my mom did the same. She didn't know why I was different, but the subscription that we were poor, and the subscription my mom got is the school bus club. So every month you would get a book, but with a test and a test that you could do on your own and analyze stuff, and you're doing experience, so you're learning so much. It's not just like the fucking cartoon they're sexualized today on television. I was really fucking learning, and she was seeing that instead of me going outside doing stupid shit, I was just focused and in knowledge. And a parent needs to do that. Needs to see what their child needs and feeds them that for them to grow.
Your mom had a good approach.
Oh yeah,
can't argue with that. So anyway, when I was there at West Point for about 16 months, it became apparent to me that I could not, really go the West Point way, conform to what they wanted. So I resigned, went to University of Tampa, where it was a local where I lived. And there I met my Russian history professor, Dr. Steven Spironis, who set the pattern for my career. And he saw what I was and what I could become. And he told me that, Jonathan, if you are going to go into the U.S. Army as an intelligence officer, being who you are, you need an equalizer. You need something that will back people off. And so he recommended that I take an educational delay from active service down to University of Miami. And I had the grades. I was able to get awarded a tuition fellowship for my master's degree. With University of Miami said, "Come here, and your master's degree's on us."
Wow.
And then they would.
And those are kind of expensive if you're paying your own, for sure, because people are in debt for 10 years sometimes just to pay that back.
Right, because I was able to, with fellowships and work study, I was able to, and a one-time assist from my parents on room and board for my first year. And I chose the 14 meal plan rather than the 20 meal plan because I figured, okay, I can get by on 14 meals. Yeah, I'll tough it out,
For sure. Let's sacrifice a meal a day, whatever.
Really, come on. Yeah, that's so anyway, so I went down to University of Miami, and He said, what you do is you delay, take an educational delay, you delay until you complete your PhD, get your master's, then go into your PhD program, then complete that, then come on active duty. And he says, you will have a credential that no one else can match.
Wow.
Or no one else can, well, it'd be a hard time for them to equal it.
Yeah.
And so what happened was I did that. I went down, stayed focused on it, got my master's degree in 1 year, delayed another 2 years, completed my PhD in May of 1980. Several months later, I came on active duty as a 24-year-old first lieutenant with a PhD in International Affairs, Concentration Soviet Area Studies. And they told me that not only was I the only lieutenant in the Army with a PhD.
Almost overqualified right there. For them, like, oh shit, he's already packed up in a ball.
I was the only lieutenant with a PhD. Okay.
That's it.
And they said, and I was the only lieutenant in the Armed Forces of the United States with a PhD at that time.
Wow.
And the big advantage of that is nobody ever called me a dumb lieutenant.
For sure not. So is that that's before your U.S. military academy, or that is it?
That was after.
Okay.
You see, I left the academy, then went through, got my commission through ROTC, took an educational delay, and basically I got promoted to first lieutenant while in the individual ready reserve. Then they brought me on active duty as a first lieutenant, which was an interesting experience. So, matter of fact, I'll tell you one amusing experience when I first they assigned me to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, U.S. Army Intelligence Center and School. I had asked for 3 overseas areas. And I asked the assignments officer, well, why'd you put me here? She said, well, we saw that you had a PhD and we wanted to get immediate use out of your PhD. And I said, okay, that's fine. And I was in Directorate of Combat Developments, their equivalent of a think tank. And my rater and the sergeant major came up to me one day and they said, Lieutenant Lockwood, we'd like you to go over and visit Mark Falk over in Training and Doctrine. You'll like Mark. He's a brilliant young man. And my response was, well, it's nice to know that he and I have something in common. Oh, they did not know how to take that.
Most people want the truth but can't handle the truth.
They didn't want to handle that. But no, I've had many experiences like that during my career. But
can you describe us one of your first experience as an intelligence officer, and how was that initial first experience with that credential? How was it like?
Well, being a lieutenant with a PhD on my first assignment, you see, one of the fascinating things was I never had to tell anyone that I never had to say, oh, my name's Lieutenant Lockwood or Captain Lockwood and I have a PhD. And everybody knew. I mean, it was like having this invisible force field of intimidation surrounding me wherever I went.
Wow.
There he is. He might use his superior.
He might use his knowledge against us.
Yeah, run. Yeah. So, but it was apparently a number of people found me intimidating. And paradoxically, they found me intimidating because I did not go out of my way to hit people over the head.
With it, yeah.
No, I was very quiet. I was very quiet. Very.
Because your expertise is going to talk for itself. So
exactly, the results would speak for themselves, and I was very calm whenever I briefed. I did not, try to hit people over the head with $5 words. I explained it very simply. And so, so I went through that. Then the assignments officer told me, well, Captain Lockwood, you need a tactical assignment. And I said, fine, send me to Germany. Make me a brigade S2, brigade level intelligence officer. I figured I might as well roll the dice because that's a major's position and I was a captain. Okay. So I wanted to show that I could perform at the major's level. And so I went to 10th Air Defense Artillery Brigade, combination Hawk and Patriot.
Okay.
And I was in the first brigade that introduced the Patriot system into the U.S. Army.
Oh shit! Okay.
So that was a very interesting experience. And I gained a lot of insight from that. Mm-hmm. So I did that, then wound up transferring down to Heidelberg, Germany, U.S. Army, Deputy Chief of Staff Intelligence, where I did have, during that period, I had some classified efficiency reports, which I obviously will not discuss on this program. And they will not be declassified until after my death. So
yeah, that's often how it works. People.
Suffice it to say, I am very proud of what I did. I did my part in the Cold War, and so that's also where I met my wife Kathleen.
Wow.
When I met her, she was working in headquarters U.S. Army Europe as the Deputy Chief Military Historian for headquarters U.S. Army Europe, and we met, and we discovered that we had a lot in common, and eventually, we got married in January of 1989, wow. And we've been happily married ever since. As a matter of fact, my wife Kathleen says that that you and I are not everyone's cup of tea, but we are very well suited to each other.
Yeah, you're not everybody's cup of tea, but at least you're in the same cup of tea. That's
what exactly. No, something like that. Yeah.
So, how do you think your background in history and psychology influenced your work as an intelligence and national security?
Oh, okay. Interestingly, now keep in mind my baccalaureate, my bachelor's was history and psychology. Mm-hmm. When I went down to University of Miami, I was talking to my future dissertation professor, Dr. Leon Garay. I was going to be in his Soviet foreign policy graduate class, and I was looking at the list of term paper topics, and I looked at this one topic. It said the evolution of the Soviet view of U.S. strategic doctrine and its implications. And I said, Dr. Garay, this looks like a fascinating term paper topic. And he said it would make an even better PhD dissertation. No one has ever done it. There's the path.
Why hasn't nobody done it yet, do you think?
Well, no one ever did it at the time because, people didn't think it was important.
Okay, yeah.
They just simply, there's a little verse by the Scottish poet Robert Burns. It goes like this: would some power the gifty gie us to see ourselves as others see us, 'twould from many a blunder free us and foolish notion. Robert Burns made a very good point. And in this case, the idea of studying how our opponents see us is potentially very enlightening, because you can what conclusions do the Russians draw about our strategy?
Exactly.
And how would it affect their foreign policy? So I sat out I oriented my term papers to various chapters in what would be my dissertation. I managed to complete a third of my dissertation before even entering on the dissertation period research itself.
Wow.
A third of it was done. So that shortened my focus. And I was able to do that. And eventually, once I got it completed and graduated, my professor sent it off to a publishing company. My dissertation, he said, wow, there's a book here struggling to get out. So they gave me suggestions on how to recraft it.
Yeah.
So that became The Soviet View of U.S. Strategic Doctrine, my first book, published in 1983. Eventually, it would become, with help of my wife Kathleen, who co-authored the second edition, The Russian View of U.S. Strategy, Its Past, Its Future. That was published in 1993. The predictions that we made in that book are coming true today.
Wow.
So that's what, even though it was published in 1993,
yeah.
Our viewers, if they buy that book and they read it, what it will do is it will, even though Vladimir Putin is not mentioned in that book, it tells you why Vladimir Putin thinks the way he does and how it affects. And it also gives important clues as to what is the most effective strategy to stop him. Mm-hmm. And again, that is something that viewers can discover for themselves. And of course, and again, in assuming we do subsequent discussions, we can go down that little rabbit hole and check that out. But then, so that I published my second book after the Russian View of U.S. Strategy. After I got caught up I became unbeknownst to me, I became the peace dividend, one of the peace dividends in the drawdown of the reduction in force following the end of the Cold War. And there was a reduction in force board for my year group where it turned out 244 majors were eventually cut from active duty. Just no separation pay, no retirement.
Wow.
I got caught up in that. And fortunately, I was able to adjust because my senior rater wanted me to become a faculty member at the Joint Military Intelligence College, which is now the National Intelligence University.
Okay.
I became a reserve faculty member and was able to continue my Army career as a reserve officer and build towards eventually gaining a 30-year, qualifying for a 30-year retirement as a colonel, because I advanced from major to lieutenant colonel to colonel in the reserves as a college professor in uniform. That's what I was. And so that worked out very well. And at the same time, I was able to, while I was not on active duty, eventually I was able to work my way into several jobs and eventually became the director of training in the Office of Intelligence and Analysis at the Department of Homeland Security. That from 2005 to 2017. And I got in as a GS-15 at the top there because that's what required.
Wow.
And eventually advanced to GS-15 Step 10, which is the maximum you can go before going to the senior executive service.
Okay.
GS-15 Step 10 had that, and looking at the regulations allowed me, by paying back some of my salary to the federal government, they allowed me to buy back my active duty service, about 14 years worth, and apply those 14 years to my civil service retirement.
What? Wow, that's awesome.
So what happened was I ended up now with a 30-year Army retirement and a 25-year DHS retirement. Wow. I would normally you'd have to sort of 55 years in order to do that. It overlapped, and I was able to take advantage of that formula to have. So now I have the 2 retirement pensions now, plus also Social Security. Wow. So, boom, we're in this position right now. We're in this position where I work because I want to, not because I absolutely have to. I don't have to be in a say, oh, gotta get a job, gotta go flip burgers or whatever.
I find it really awesome that you manage at least to get something for your retirement and stuff like that. Because I've talked to other people that were in the Army or a DSS secret agent. Now I had a diplomatic secret agent, and when he became handicapped because of the job, they cut him totally. Like he has a quarter of the income, and he's just trying to just sell a book just to fucking eat there. And he talked on a podcast that often a lot of people that are in the Army or law enforcement, the reason they're not gonna mention they have problems is because they're gonna cut you right away without no pay at the end, and that's what happened to him. And he talks about thinking about suicide multiple times because he knows that that's the solution for his wife and kids to be good forever. That's how deep you go, because you fight for your country to defend people and for people to have their fucking freedom and Instagram and all this shit, and literally we treat them like crap, like if they didn't put their lives at risk for us, and that is fucking disgusting. Everybody that defended their country and fucking applied these laws there for people there should be good for life and not homeless. Here it happens too. We have a lot of homeless people that were Army vets. Like, we're not taking care of people that gave us our freedom. For me, it's disgusting. These people should be all good for life. I don't get it. So I find it really amazing that you managed to get it.
Well, and again, one of the things I've always kept in mind throughout my entire life as a Christian is that to remember that God is always in control. God, I've always believed that He has a plan for my life, and the thing is, you discover as a Christian that when you become a Christian, that God will take you through some very amazing paths.
Yeah, hell and back.
Yeah, you as Winston Churchill once said, if you find yourself going through hell, keep going.
I had never heard that one. I like it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Oh, that is good shit.
If you find yourself going through hell, keep going. And but the interesting thing here is that I always trust that God will reveal to me paths that I need to consider. Like, for example, this podcast. Yeah, just a few weeks ago, I've for 3 years I've had the podcast on the Ukraine show, and my producers are trying to advertise me with other larger venues, which could happen. And I said, I just be patient. And in the meantime, because I have the foundation, because I've trusted and planned ahead for it and took advantage of the opportunities when I recognize them, then now I'm in a position where I can wait for a suitable opportunity. Well, let's say for a full-time job or full-time,
but you can be selective now and choose.
Yeah, I can exactly.
Yeah,
I can,
and that is power, I find.
And I don't have to panic.
Exactly.
I can pay the bills and just do this thing and just keep moving merrily along. And of course, the one of the main promises that I kept to my wife when we got married, because she was such a voracious reader, I told you.
Yeah.
And I promised her that she would never have to put a budget or a limitation on the number of books she could buy. And believe me, she can read, she can speed read and read voraciously. Thank God for the invention of ebooks. Otherwise, our house would be wall-to-wall books.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Sure.
But in any case, because she's had this opportunity, she keeps voraciously reading and studying and seeing relationships, and she talks with me about them. And again, we keep feeding and reinforcing.
For sure. She's not missing a subject to talk about, for sure.
No.
Most girls in life have nothing to say, so that is amazing. For sure, she's just she can go on anything.
I'm not.
I love it.
I'm not going to go that far. Everyone has something interesting to say if you're willing to wait longer.
Yeah.
And but the fascinating thing is that because I've had virtually you could say in a sense that my intelligence career started back as the foundations of it started back when I was 13.
Absolutely.
First began to develop military history, wargaming, and that sort of evolved, and I acquired more skills. And the double major in history and psychology. Psychology was part, I want to know how the other side thinks, but psychology was also an effort to gain insight into myself, because I was a mystery to myself for a great deal of my life.
For sure.
And but now that I'm not quite so much a mystery, I have more insight, and it gives me a better ability to deal with new situations. And so it's a fascinating profession. The intelligence profession is, and I hope, as we branch out into various other subjects, hopefully in future podcasts and so forth, we can go into this. But to give your viewers is never give up.
Absolutely.
That's the saying. Never give up and say it's all over. No. Yeah, I thought that when I got caught in that reduction in force and I had to leave active duty, I don't mind telling you, it was April 30th, 1993. I was prepared to transition and all this stuff, but I didn't have a job. And I remember I was in my home office in another house, and I remember that I was crying, and I was praying too. And I said, Lord, I know it says in the Bible that all things work together for good to them that love God, who are called according to his purpose. Please forgive me if I do not understand how you intend to bring good out of this.
Out of my situation right now.
Out of this situation.
Yeah.
And of course, then God proceeded to show me.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I did. So your listeners need to trust God, be patient, and God will show you the path. That is the main. Shall we say? We're almost at Easter. That's the main Easter eggs.
Yeah.
That you can take out of this.
I remember when I was at one of my lowest points and with addiction of cocaine 10 years ago, like
Dang.
at certain point there, I was like telling myself like, okay, well, farewell. Like this is how I'm gonna go out. Like there's no light at the end of this fucking tunnel, and I was just. I never see the light, and I was asking fucking God, like, why am I going through this? Like most people that were 25 right there were all chill. Why am I fighting these fucking demons? Like, do I deserve this shit and everything? And after you become sober 2 years later, and you fight back to recover all the damage you did to yourself and monetarily, then you start realizing the lesson that was taught during that time. Man, I value the dollar now to the highest degree. I value life to the highest degree now. Me just breathing the air outside is so valuable now. But before, I took it for granted. And money, when you're in that kind of world, though, you just spend it as fast as you get it. And now, I know what a dollar is. Like, I'm not just gonna waste it. So there's a lot of learning in the darkest times that we can have. It's just at that moment we never feel that there is. But when you get to the end point, you're like, oh shit, that's what I learned. That's what built in me. And you're always normally a better person or more built on the way out.
And the neat thing about that is that many of the lessons that God wants to teach you, you only learn the lessons when you look back.
Yeah, exactly. In retrospect.
After you've come through the experience, then you realize, oh, that's why I didn't get this, or that's why God wanted me to go down this path. And that's the main thing you have to keep in mind. It's impossible for us to see the big picture because we're finite, we're human, and that is one of the things that I've learned throughout my life is to, being patient. Learning to wait on what many times I don't see a situation developing the way I would like. My wife reminds me constantly to be patient, because I said, there are lessons we have to learn. And now I'm in this position where I can look back on my life and all the major events and see and understand better why they happened the way they did. Because it was for my own good. I just didn't realize it at the time. So this is now given the current situation that we're in, and you're looking at the world and say, okay, this is really exciting. Especially when you look at for example, President Trump with his tariff strategy. At first, your first impulse is to hit the panic button and say, okay, this is the end of the world. No. When you do the research and you do critical thinking,
exactly,
and you look at various sources that explain why he is doing what he is doing, and you look at the complete context, then you discover
how much it makes sense.
Now it's making sense. Now you also understand that President Trump, what he is doing right now with the tariffs and simultaneously cutting taxes and simultaneously trying to cut spending, that combination's never been done before.
Exactly. It's always one direction. Yeah.
Right. It's always some other aspect. Yeah. But he's trying to do all these things at once, which is very complex strategy. It requires a lot of constant attention. You have to, and no small amount of risk, because he's got one
the backlash of it.
He's got one shot to do this.
Yeah, exactly. Because on television in Canada, because I live in Canada, there, and oh my god, it's ridiculous. Like there are literally kids, the politicians of Canada, like, oh yeah, you want to put tariffs on us? We're gonna put tariffs on the syrup and shit. And I'm like, you guys are fucking morons. It's like, do you know how much things we import compared to them? It's we're gonna get drowned if we play that game. But that's what they're doing right now. Like babies.
And it's so funny because my host tomorrow on the Ukraine show is based in Canada. Okay. And the other co-host, Ivan Kirichenko, he's based in Kiev, Ukraine. So it's the three of us tomorrow, talking about this. And my host, usually goes after me talking about, Trump this and Trump that. No.
That's the brainwash of Canadian media. It's incredible.
Yeah, and sometimes I tease him with says, "Well, are you looking forward to being a vassal in the mighty Trump empire?"
What's incredible that I realized by doing research in media and the brainwash and all this shit, well, when you look at the American television for news there, well, it's really divided in two. You got the left and the right, and there's way less channels of the right. But when you look in Canada, there's no left or right, okay? What we do on our side is fucking ridiculous. We just take what the left says in the US. Nothing of the right, and we just, that is the 100% what's going on in the US. And so they take for me, is the brainwash side, and literally that's what they feed to the Canadians. So every Canadian that I meet that didn't do their own research hate Trump, don't know why, don't know, they can't say a phrase he said.
Yeah, interestingly enough, Fox News comes the closest to being balanced. Now they're very pro-Trump, but they also invite on their program, they have Democratic
exactly
speakers, and so you get more of a sense. And these people are at least civil in their conversation. They don't engage in shouting matches.
They don't attack the personal person.
Right,
they attack the fact.
There's no ad hominem.
Exactly.
Attack the person type of argument. So I use that, and I use other sources to try and give myself a very balanced picture. And I look occasionally at the far left just simply to see, okay, what are they saying now? And then critically examine it, says, are they really, why are they saying this? So it's a fascinating thing. Yeah, and our viewers need to remember one thing. Whenever you are looking at various sources, no matter where the source is, always consider the source. What are they saying, and why are they saying it? What part of the political spectrum are they representing? And you have to take it from there. And always remember also that this is constant stream of information, which is never finalized. You don't really realize the full truth until, like your walk in life, until you look back at it in retrospect, see why they're saying these things.
Absolutely.
So it is and so anyway, right now I am, continuing my research and development and so forth. And of course, at some point in the future, we'll be able to discuss the so-called Golden Dome project. And that is a fascinating thing right there. Which the objectives of what President Trump wants and how the Russians would see it. And I can tell you some interesting things. You would be able to, our readers, if they look at, if they, again, read the Russian view of U.S. strategy, they'll be able to understand they'll be able to predict what the Russian attitude towards Golden Dome would be. And without that, because there was a former period where how the Russians reacted to the Strategic Defense Initiative of Ronald Reagan, SDI, otherwise known as Star Wars.
Okay.
But the Russians were terrified of SDI because it threatened to neutralize their nuclear missile arsenal, in their belief. And that is probably one of the unspoken truths in this whole dialogue about nuclear missiles and so forth. The one thing that the Russian military and political leadership fear more than anything else is they fear, even though they don't want to directly admit it, they fear the potential of American technology to neutralize the one thing that makes Russia a great power. The nuclear missile arsenal.
Because right when you stop that, like, there's you can't do much because they have down their side, so you're fucked.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a checkmate for them. If you implement that, they're gonna feel against the wall.
If we neutralize their nuclear missile arsenals, they have nothing. As a matter of fact, former Russian President Boris Yeltsin, back in 1994, in a speech to the Russian Duma, made a statement which, to me, kind of gives the whole game away. He said, the only reason Russia is considered a great power is because its armed forces have nuclear weapons. Now that practically, and Putin, although not quite being that forthright about it, he has been trying to brandish his nuclear missile arsenal in a way trying to intimidate the West. And because to Russia, nuclear missiles are their only real great power currency. If they don't have nuclear weapons, they have nothing. They can't coerce or threaten the United States with anything.
Yeah, that's it.
And so, but now, just based on what I just said there, you can imagine what the Russian reaction privately is going to be to the so-called Golden Dome.
The Golden Dome would be like a dome that would be over the states to protect it.
Well, here's where the misunderstanding can come in, and I'll go ahead and again give you all the Reader's Digest version.
Yeah.
But the Iron Dome, it's intended to be a larger version or a more effective version of Israel's Iron Dome. Their Iron Dome is very effective at blocking short range and intermediate range ballistic missiles, mainly from Iran or other Arab nations, but it's very effective. The Golden Dome is intended to be the United States version, which is supposed to be able to block all nuclear missiles. The only problem with that is that, and people in Congress recognize this, that the Golden Dome has to be able to block intercontinental ballistic missiles coming over the North Pole from Russia or China.
Would it be a solid dome, like physical,
No,
or
no,
like a energy dome, like nothing?
Not even that.
Okay.
What the Golden Dome? It's more of a metaphor. It's a metaphor, not a physical construct. A Golden Dome, in effect, you would have, because they talk about there's only one. There are two ways to block intercontinental ballistic missiles. Okay. And there only one is being publicly discussed. The other one, which I will talk about on a future program, is something no one is thinking about, but I have been thinking about it. And we'll save that little Easter egg for a future program.
I played video games, and I'm telling myself that there's two ways as well. I would think that there's the scrambler, literally, because it's a homing missile. It's a missile that knows where it goes. Well, when it gets close to that, well, the scrambler just it continues in a straight line. And the other thing I would be thinking is EMP, literally to stop its electronics and make it drop. That's what I'm thinking. And me, I have no knowledge.
No, that's a fair shot. A lot of people in Congress are thinking the same thing, but they've also allocated $900 million in this Golden Dome bill.
Oh, shit.
Part of it, $900 million to do a space-based interceptor study. Okay, I could save them $900 million right there. With my proposed solution.
Just give me a percent of it.
just give me a little cut. Yeah, make that. But anyway, but right now they talk about space-based interceptors, which essentially are satellites that would be armed with lasers that would shoot down nuclear missiles in their boost phase while they're on their way up. Okay. That's the most effective way you stop.
Yeah, stop it before it arrives. Yeah.
You before it can get to deploying its decoys or maneuvering or anything else like that, you want to shoot down the nuclear missile, intercontinental missile, before it can deploy its decoys or maneuver. While it's on its way up, it is at its most vulnerable. And so people have got this general idea in their back of their minds of having a space-based interceptor system. The problem with that is, and I discovered this through my participation in a war game back in 1997, and where we did a simulated war in 2020, is when you have U.S. satellites in orbit, and you've also got Russian and Chinese counter space satellites in orbit, guess what you've got? You've got a Mexican standoff in low Earth orbit, in which the side that fires first is going to have a big advantage. Unfortunately, that's a hair trigger situation that's highly unstable. And the people who are proposing this space-based interceptor study do not realize that yet. And when you do, but there is another unspoken strategy, which I have been working on for a couple of years at least, that I've incorporated into one of my briefings, which is unclassified, strangely enough, because hey, it's my idea. There's nothing classified about my idea.
Yeah.
but nobody's thinking about it. So that is one of the things that I am pursuing, so that when I get to am in front of the proper audience, preferably someone who can do something about
exactly.
my idea.
Yeah, obviously.
I can say, okay, this is what you do. And so this is the sort of thing that I'm looking at. And right now I am patiently waiting for the right opportunity and the right audience to be able to tell them, okay, this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
And of course, right now is not a good time for me to be advancing this sort of idea, because because there's all of this volatile, all this smoke and fire and flame and whatever about what's going on right now. They're trying to decide if the tariffs are going to work, if the tech. There's a lot of political theater going on right now, which is tending to obscure the rest of this discussion. But yeah, it's a very good metaphor for the Trump administration. Yeah, he's doing a lot of big, decisive things. And that's why the major plurality of the American people still support him and are willing to look past all of this hysterical nonsense about, oh my God, he's going to wreck the global economy. But
for sure, but like Gutfield said on Fox,
Gutfield, yeah.
He's like, there's some good and there's some give and take about everybody, people. And he's like, do I agree with everything Trump says? The fuck not. But is he the most wrapped up, best president we got? Goddamn right. So, it's okay to go to a restaurant and not like everything in it. You can just go and take what you want, and that's what you should do with Trump, because we're not going to have a better package from now on. So let's deal with what we have. A lot of people are just see the grabber by the pussy and stuff like that, and they're literally anti, or right when he talks about the wall, they're like, oh, he's racist, when fucking welfare for black people has been the lowest in 45 years because of him, but oh yeah, he's racist. So
well, one of the things that I've said on the other Ukraine show program is that if you don't like what President Trump is saying, just wait 10 minutes.
Exactly, something's going to come out. Yeah, exactly.
And it was like when Stephen Colbert had on one of his guests, they were talking about the Space Force during Trump's first term, and Stephen Colbert was being very critical of the Space Force idea, and his guest said, "No, well, just because President Trump says something, that doesn't make it a bad idea." Mm-hmm. He argued for the good things that a Space Force could do, and very sensible discussion, and that's the kind of attitude that one should take whenever President Trump makes a pronouncement. You need to take a deep breath, listen to what he said, then examine and look at what other people, a variety of other people, don't just accept one source. Mm-hmm. Your listeners should look at a variety of listeners on all sides of the political spectrum. And then that way, if you take the time to look at these various things and then wait and see how it develops, then you say, okay, now I'm starting to see what's happening. Yeah. And you put yourself in a better position. Oh, by the way, here's another little thing, but to help your listeners better understand what President Trump is trying to do. This is kind of an easy one. If you want to have a really good idea of the geopolitics, of the geography, of what President Trump is up to, as well as the other leaders of the world, there's a book I would highly recommend by Tim Marshall entitled Prisoners of Geography. 10 maps that show you the problems that each of many world leaders face. There's a whole chapter on the United States. There's a whole chapter on Russia. Nice. And there's one on China. And so various other sectors of the world. Yeah. And once you read that book, which I would recommend for every adult American.
I'll put it on the screen right now. Nice.
Yeah, Prisoners of Geography. Yeah, I highly recommend that book.
Nice.
And if they want a mechanism to help them play through and understand it, well, if your listeners are familiar with the board game Risk.
Yeah, I am.
Risk. Yeah, okay. go out and get a game of Risk. And then you can play what I call the Trump scenario. Here's the Trump scenario.
Okay.
You get okay, there are 6 continents shown on the world map. And in the Trump scenario, you have 6 players. One of those players is the Trump player. He has control of all of North America, which was, Central America, all of North America. And each of the other 5 has control of one continent. So you've got 6 players, each controlling a continent, and the Trump player controls North America. And the Trump player has the first move. Then you play it out from there. Because in Risk, you've got about 20 armies that you can allocate and so forth. And they represent various types. They're an abstract representation of types of power that each player has. But you can, by playing that kind of a scenario, you gain a greater understanding of what President Trump is actually up to.
Well, I wouldn't have thought of that. We need an intelligence officer to think about that one. Still good.
No. Well, I think one other political cartoonist thought something along those lines, and it showed President Trump playing a game of Risk with the rest of the world.
Nice.
But
I'm sure they played it with a word play too, like a Risk of having Trump controlling. I'm sure at the same time of that for sure. During your time as an intelligence officer, what was the most crucial piece of information or event that influenced your career path? Is there one in particular that stands out?
While I was an intelligence officer on active duty, influenced my career path. Well, when I had to, this is kind of tricky. The piece of information. This was during my period down in Heidelberg when I had classified intelligence positions, so I couldn't discuss what I did. But because I did such a good job there, basically that saved my career, because I had previously had a bad boss that was trying to run me out of the Army. And I said, no. So I managed to escape from that bad boss.
Wow.
Got me down to Heidelberg. And of course, that's where I met my wife. Great. So that worked out. But the jobs that I had in the headquarters that were classified, those jobs
really changed the game for you and your career path.
It changed the game for me in my career path. Wow. And enabled me certainly to get to major. And so that by the time I had to leave because of the reduction in force, I had a very solid foundation to where the Joint Military Intelligence College wanted me to join their faculty, because I had all the academic credentials, including the military ones. And that enabled me to complete my intelligence career. And to complete my military intelligence career, because I still had civilian intelligence that I could go into in the Department of Homeland Security. I was able to build on that. So my combined intelligence career, if you will, spans, the portion of, if you include my part in graduate school, which started in 1977, goes from 1977 until I retired from the federal government in 2017. So 1977 to 2017, 50. That 40 years, 40 year span. Yeah. And I can still, based on the activities that I have in front of me and the potential for, picking up a good side gig or even a full-time job, depending on who takes notice of what I have to offer, and say, okay, let's have Dr. Lockwood on. So I just take it as it comes.
Did your military history shape a bit your approach in current security issues, especially when it comes to Russia?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, my study of military history and wargaming. I had war games on the Eastern Front, that I studied, and my study of military history was spanning all periods, and especially the Eastern Front. Matter of fact, one interesting little anecdote I will tell you is in 1986, When I was in Germany, I was invited to a little function that the Americans were sponsoring for their German counterparts called German American Friendship Day. Yeah, that's what it was. It was German American Friendship Day.
Wow.
And I was assigned to a retired German field marshal from World War II. Wow. He was about 86 years old or so. And I won't tell you his name because that just gets complicated.
Yeah, it's all good.
But I saw his name, and he had been on the Eastern Front, and he had been commanding in the defense of Berlin in the closing days of World War II.
Wow.
And I had a war games which I could explore alternate scenarios and stuff. And I had studied the Eastern Front very thoroughly. And of course, the people who were assigning me to him did not know this. Mm-hmm. They did not know that I could speak that thoroughly to him.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I was introduced to this gentleman, and I greeted him in German, and he lit up. He was happy. His English was excellent.
We appreciate when the somebody does an effort.
Right. I started talking to him in German. He went back into English, and we started talking. And I told him that because I had studied his biography and what he had done, and I told him that I had done some wargame experimentation about an alternate strategy, about how basically I took the two panzer armies which the Germans had used late in World War II for their Battle of the Bulge offensive against the West. I experimented with, what if the Germans had taken those two panzer armies and used them to attack east against the Russians that were coming towards them and penetrate to the Courland Peninsula, where the German 19th Army was trapped by the advancing Russians, and open a corridor and get that 19th Army out of there, and then pull back and reinforce the Eastern Front and hold the Russians out of Germany so that they could surrender to the Americans, the British, and the French rather than the Russians. Mm-hmm. Hold back the Russians, concentrate on surrender to the Americans in the West. And I explained that all to him, and his eyes lit up.
For sure, he was like, "Oh shit!"
Oh, he was excited.
That's incredible.
I explained it to him. He says, "Yes, that would have worked."
Exactly.
I was talking on his level.
Yeah.
And he says, "Yes, that would have worked." Now, the interesting conclusion to this came several months later. I did not know at the time that he was dying of stage 4 cancer.
Oh, wow.
And he had just gotten married, and to a much younger American woman. And months later, I was up in that same area in Darmstadt, and she told me that her husband had died recently, but she told me that he had come home so happy from that. She says,
"Oh yeah, you lit him up."
I lit him up, and he said he died believing that the Americans at last were taking him seriously and treating him with respect, because they gave me this captain who not only could he speak German, but he knew all about the Eastern Front campaigns and stuff.
From both sides.
From both sides.
Exactly.
He says he understood me, and he said, and we spent a couple of hours talking about the Eastern Front. Yeah, so
that probably had a big impact on you. That conversation, knowing that you had that of an impact on somebody that lived it to the highest degree, and thinking that U.S. was just the pure enemy, and having this
that they weren't treating him with respect anymore because but he died a happy man. And
that's incredible.
But the thing is, you never know whom you are going to influence. You never know what encounters you're going to have. And so you have to be prepared and be open and be flexible on those sorts of things. So my study of military history and strategy and wargaming has come in very handy throughout my life, expanding my mind to look at the other possibilities, to look at alternate strategies,
Yeah.
alternate
You're
histories.
literally so not biased. You're literally gathering all the information and then formulating your a real thought of it instead of being the biased side of the U.S. thinking of what we think about Germany and stuff like that. At least now you have it all.
Well, I do have the advantage of my colleagues in DHS. Shortly after I got there to that office, they remarked that I had the reputation of being the most unflappable person in DHS. You know, that I never lost my temper. I did not blow my cool. I mean, I had I had a couple of colleagues who were in the who had short tempers, and they also had this awful habit of dropping the f bomb in their conversation. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, you're clean compared to these guys.
Yeah.
Okay, these two guys, yeah, and I said to one of them, said, "You better hope that you never get into a serious argument with this other guy, because all of a sudden it's going to be like bringing two critical masses of U-235 together." Be one big effing explosion.
Yeah. Just create a real fucking conflict right there.
Yeah,
That's why you gotta be selective in your words, especially when you're dealing with policies and other international people.
you cannot afford to lose your temper. It just,
Absolutely.
you lose control of your temper, you lose control of yourself, and you just handed control over to the other person. It just does not work.
Did your time in the GS-15 and the Department of Homeland Security shape your how did it shape your understanding of the nation's security strategy?
Well, the my strategy was from my perspective was shaped by a different perspective then, because I was selected to be their director of training. So intelligence training.
So they had a
To,
lot of trust in you,
oh yeah,
oh
they
yeah,
did.
for sure.
And so I spent my 12 years being a curriculum manager and instructor on mobile training teams, as well as helping to direct the overall training effort. But the interesting thing about that is, again, because the for a while there, DHS had morale problems. One of the exceptions to that was the training department. Why? Why would intelligence training people have higher morale than the rest of the department? Well, it's because in intelligence training, you are delivering a tangible product, a tangible benefit to the students. You are teaching them skills. Interestingly enough, critical analytical thinking was one of the main things we taught. And in intelligence writing and briefing, the overall intelligence enterprise, all the basic skills that an intelligence analyst would need in order to perform his or her job properly. And critical analytical thinking, we had a 1 week long course on that. And we had an end of course exercise, which helped reinforce those skills. But critical analytical thinking is so necessary. Well,
Absolutely.
not just to the intelligence profession,
Yeah, for
but
anybody.
yeah, for all aspects of life, and being able to recognize flaws in one's thinking. And it requires a degree of self-awareness, which is all too uncommon. People are not aware of the flaws in their thinking, or not aware even not aware that they could make them. So it does require a certain amount of introspection and self-awareness, but it's something which has to be developed over time. It does not arise. You're not born a critical thinker.
No, absolutely. And they
You're
don't teach you
developed.
to critical think in elementary and high school.
Oh
They don't at
no.
all. They just,
Oh no.
this is the facts. Those are the books. Know it by heart, and you're considered smart.
You
It's
say
not.
that, that's the problem. Teachers, unfortunately, are telling students what to think. They never teach them how to think.
Exactly. I came back home one day and I told my mom, like you do a test there between me and a person, and like about life or anything logic, I think I'm gonna destroy them. But that girl in school, she has 90 and I'm at 70. It's only because she remembers this bullshit more than me. But let's say we do a real IQ test. I think I got her, Mom. Is like, I don't get it. I thought school was all about
Ooh,
creating the most intelligent people, but it's not. It's really
no.
who remembers this more than the other. So somebody that will have picture.
They're trying to stamp you into a mold.
That's it. And
And make sure
somebody
so you can fit into so you can fit into certain little boxes. And
exactly.
let me tell you about IQ tests. Not all IQ tests are created equal.
Well, for
Okay,
sure. Yeah.
they're all different. They are used different for different scales. Uh, the Now, for example, I would be scared to death to take the IQ test that was given to Marilyn Vos Savant. She's the woman with the reputed highest IQ in the world,
Yeah. Okay.
226.
Goddamn.
You take the IQ test that she took that was given to her. That had to be the butt kicker of all IQ tests. I would it would certainly reveal where I am on the
Yeah,
scale.
yeah, for sure.
But the IQ test that I was given, which when people ask me what my IQ is, I preface it by saying, okay, IQ changes over time depending on what test you're given and what
Exactly.
it's designed to do.
Yeah, you can do 140 on one and 185 on the other, and you're like, okay, am I
Yeah,
genius or just average?
yeah, well, here's the thing. What you When I took the last time I took an IQ test that gave me a number, it was in my sophomore year of high school, and our whole sophomore class was given this 80-question IQ test, multiple choice, and we got the results back. It took a long time. We got it back in our beginning of our senior year, and okay, so this snapshot, 80-question test. Okay, this big book, file book with all the scores in it and so forth came back. And I was in the ROTC, junior ROTC office looking through it, and they discovered that I had the highest IQ.
Let's
Yeah.
go.
I missed one question.
Wow.
Showed IQ 150, as it was designed to go up that high.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, the word got out.
Yeah, yeah. They're like, he almost aced it perfect. And that is rare as shit for
Yeah.
sure.
So anyway, but that's a snapshot in time. And what that does is there are several types of intelligence, as you know. And there are other aspects of intelligence are creativity and imagination, things that Albert Einstein pointed out, that creativity and imagination
Is
are
important.
just as important being
Absolutely.
able to, because he talked about these thought experiments that he would do in developing his theory of relativity. And he had a very highly developed set of imagination creativity skills. So it's you can't measure IQ with just a number. It gives you an indication. Okay, this person may, but then you have to look at what does that person do with it. There are people who advertise themselves through having taken an IQ test several times. That's kind of
Yeah.
fakey, where they get this. They finally get a really high IQ score, and then
They
try.
save it, put it on Instagram.
Yeah, yeah, you got it. Yeah. No, I have one of the world's highest IQs. Oh, please, people like that really need to avoid laxatives at all, lest they suddenly do a Wicked Witch of the West imitation and disappear. But so you have these people that, again, for one reason or another, want to promote themselves as being this. But then when someone does that, you have to look at, okay, this person says that he or she has a high IQ.
Yeah.
What have they in fact produced?
Yeah. What did they do with that?
What have you done? What evidence is there that shows that demonstrates that, yes, I have a high IQ and I produced this, and this? Okay. Then if you've got these physical evidence that shows that the products that demonstrate that, yes, you can produce great and wonderful things, okay, then your IQ test has more credibility. Otherwise, you could be exposed as a charlatan.
Absolutely. Looking back at your role, looking back at what role did your experience as an intelligence officer play in shaping the U.S. foreign policy during your time in that service?
Well, what I did is when I was a Soviet threat instructor at Fort Huachuca, for example, and in subsequent classes or courses that I taught, I would always introduce a briefing or a class on not only on U.S. and Soviet strategy, but also I would introduce a segment on the Russian view of U.S. strategy. Go through it. This is what the Russians concluded. These are the implications of that for foreign policy. And I was using that as a basis for that we need to develop superior ballistic missile defense. And fortunately, my first book had come out at the same time as Reagan's Star Wars speech. So I was able to develop and talk about Star Wars and its desirability at the same time that my first book was out there, and I had a body of knowledge that I could refer to.
Oh yeah.
So that helped quite a bit.
For sure.
And so anyway, so right now it's so now what I'm doing is I'm patiently waiting, and again, on my other producers, like I say, are trying to advertise me with, say, Fox News, and say they take a podcast that I do and say, hey, you really should have Dr. Lockwood on, and yes, he's got some interesting perspectives, and because Fox News is pretty much agreed on as the most pro-Trump of the available networks out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and there are other podcasts and others that are comparably pro-Trump and so forth. There's a mixed bag all out there. Mm-hmm. But so again, we advertise this and we pass it along and say, okay, well, let's see what Dr. Lockwood has to say, and it's like bread cast upon the waters. You go out and see who takes it.
And like your wife said, I wanted to say this earlier. She's like, I'll be patient and stuff. A lot of people in life, they just wait for the destination. It's like, no. Appreciate the journey of learning, going through hell and back and all that, because life is mostly the journey. Those destinations arrive maybe once, twice, maybe 10 times if you're a lucky person, but most of the time they don't arrive all the time. So if you're waiting on that to feel achieved or waiting on that to be happy, man, it's gonna be a long ass life. Appreciate the fucking journey. Like there's a guy I was talking to last week. He's like, oh, how much money did your music do? I'm like, well, bro, it's just the first year. He's like, yeah, but how much? I'm like, well, just $300. He's like, damn, you can't live with that. Well, obviously, but it's the ball that starts rolling, bro. It's like maybe 2 years is gonna be a bit bigger. You gotta start that ball, and patience is the key to success. People, a lot of people like just wait for these big accomplishment. Wait for that person, my love, to find a love or buy that house. No, appreciate the journey before the house. Appreciate the journey before the career.
Yeah, let me just give you a minor, just a small example here. As I told you, I've got my retirement pensions and I've got Social Security and so forth, and that puts us in a pretty good position right now. And so what now is happening on the big picture? President Trump wants to drop taxes on Social Security. Okay, don't tax Social. So I just look at that and I do a little back of the envelope calculation and say, "Oh, okay, my tax bracket drops," and okay, that's a benefit. Yeah, then, and he's even talking about dropping federal income taxes altogether. Now, keep in mind before you say, "Oh my God, he can't do that." Keep in mind that before 1913. There was no federal income tax.
I know. I teach that to people. I'm like, before 1913, there was nobody stealing your money, but after that,
no federal income tax. And how was the United States getting its income? Tariffs. They were getting it through tariffs and other things, and they learned how to keep the budget, pretty well balanced and pretty well restrained, and so. What President Trump is doing is not without historical precedent. He's doing it on a scale that's never been attempted before. So it's a calculated roll of the dice.
Absolutely.
But there is a lot of good historical precedent and theory to back it up. Mm-hmm. So it's worth a shot. Because we do know that if we continued down the path that it was started by the previous administrations, we know how that's going to end.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, economists will say, this is where we're heading. Okay, it's time to go in a different direction. And so far, he's got the support of the American people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fascinating. So now you have to figure out, okay, and so here where I'm sitting, all right, what President Trump is doing, there will be certain minor, if he does these things like drop federal income tax and so forth, then okay, my wife and I are in an even better position, based on what we've done. And so we have that. And then what we have to do is, well, let's say, okay, if I get this a good side gig, if you will, or a good job that I'm happy with, that I feel productive in, that brings in additional income. Fine, great.
Mm-hmm.
We can do more things. We don't accumulate stuff because my age, we've got plenty of stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Don't
and
have to
thank
worry
God
about
of ebooks, because you'd be packed to the roof in books with your wife.
Yeah,
for
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, like I said, that's why I'm grateful for ebooks. We don't have to worry about that. She reads voraciously, and I always have room in my budget for her books.
That's beautiful.
And,
I have a critical thinking segment, so this is it. So I'm gonna ask you like 4 questions about critical thinking, and we'll see where you go with it. So, what's the greatest lesson you learned in your time in intelligence that you still apply today?
Greatest lesson that I learned that I still apply today. Same lesson my dad told me. When I was growing up, always consider the source. Always consider why the person is saying that is telling you something is telling you that. Do they have an agenda? Do they have a reason to? Are they trying to manipulate you? So you have to and my wife Kathleen always cautions me about that and looking at agendas of other people and other organizations. And my beloved wife is passing through right now. Yeah. Well, yes, we're having fun. she says, you've been on there almost 2 hours. Well, time flies when you're having fun.
Absolutely.
But always consider the source.
Yeah, that is so.
And if you can take that one step further to gain that skill that poet Robert Burns talked about, being able to see yourself as others see you. Now that's a rare skill, and again, it conveys much wisdom if you can cultivate it. And basically, you rely on, in order to gain that skill, you rely on good friends who are not afraid to tell you the truth.
The truth, yeah, exactly. So, second question: what's a mistake you made in your career that you definitely didn't repeat?
Mistake I made in my career that I definitely did not repeat. Okay. Trying to go for a command position. To do it, because the conventional wisdom is that your intelligence career goes, you have more likely to promotion if you have a successful command in the position.
Okay.
And I tried on several occasions to be selected for a company command position, which is the most available thing that I had for an intelligence officer. And unsuccessful. And then I realized, hey, I might as well play to strength. I need to play to strength, being an analyst and other skills that were there for me. Command is not in my makeup. And so I did not ever repeat trying to for a command position.
What's your personal biggest achievement, either in your career or your life, that you're most proud of?
Wow. Okay. I've got a number of things that I'm very proud of. The thing that my achievement that apparently has given me quite a significant reputation is my development of the Lockwood Analytical method for prediction, which is available in textbook form, as I've mentioned to you. You can show that to your listeners. LAMP, the Lockwood Analytical method for prediction. It is a structured method for predictive intelligence analysis. And apparently, the Defense Intelligence Agency has described it as a classical methodology. It is still in use in the intelligence community.
Nice.
Matter of fact, when I was working as a contractor a few years ago, and one of my fellow instructors saw my name, and he asked me, he says, Dr. Lockwood, are you the Lockwood of LAMP fame?
That's awesome.
Are you the Lockwood of LAMP fame?
Goddamn right.
I said, yeah. I said, yes, I'm Lockwood who invented lamp.
Wow.
And so, yes, that has given me arguably a worldwide reputation.
Absolutely.
Because I got, back in the year 2000, when I was working for Answer Incorporated, I got an invitation from Santiago, Chile.
Wow.
These two young women who were going through graduate had seen my lamp method, and they incorporated it into their master's thesis. And their government, or their university, Bernardo O'Higgins University in Santiago, Chile, invited me down to Chile to give a lecture.
Wow.
On the lamp.
That's awesome.
Which was
you must have been thrilled. You're like, man, wow.
I was there giving to this big auditorium of people. It was simultaneously I had headphones on. It was simultaneously being translated into Spanish.
Wow. Okay.
So I made a point of speaking slowly.
Yeah.
More so as to give the interpreter time to translate.
Yeah. Wow.
And that was, so I was very proud of that.
Man,
and now what I have is I have something that will certainly outlive me, that method.
Absolutely.
And, many people, I have taught thousands of students online as well as in classrooms. I've taught thousands of students the lamp method, and so many more people know of me than I know them. So that is something I've been very proud of, and I'm hoping I have the first lamp textbook in 2013 published. I might be able to, God willing, to publish a revised and updated edition. Yeah, because lamp lends itself to a variety of intelligence.
Yeah. And life advanced so fast.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure, yeah.
As a matter of fact, once you have a chance to see it yourself, you'll understand. Yes, this can be applied to quite a few things. So, that's the one I'm proudest of.
And what's one of the hardest decisions you had to make?
One of the hardest decisions I had to make?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, when I was at West Point, again, that 16 months I was at West Point, as I told you, West Point hates nonconformists.
Yeah.
And West Point had something called a leadership evaluation system, where they determined your aptitude for serving in the military. Leadership aptitude for the service. It is a not very well-known category at West Point, but you can be kicked out of the academy for deficiency in leadership aptitude for the service.
Wow.
And how they determine this, they used peer ratings. Everyone in your company ranked who was highest in leadership aptitude and the two people at the bottom. And so I was ranked at the bottom by everybody. I didn't even know who my friends were. I was the fire hydrant, and all my friends were dogs.
Wow.
So that put me into a situation eventually where they gave me a Category 1 leadership board, and then they kicked me to a Category 2 leadership board, which determined whether or not I would be kicked out of the academy for deficiency. I consulted with an attorney, a military attorney, and I asked him, what is the last moment that I can resign from the academy and not have it on my record?
Yeah.
We would simply say resign for personal reasons. And the attorney said, well, according to current regulations, the way it reads, you can resign at any moment before the board renders its final decision. So most Category 2 boards ran for a maximum of 2 hours. Mine ran for 9 because I cross-examined everybody.
I got so much questions too.
I wanted them to be. I wanted to hold them accountable.
Clarify yourself. Oh yeah.
Explain why you said this.
That's so good.
And I dragged them through a 9-hour. And finally, at the end of that board, when they said, I asked the president of the board, I said, sir, I would like to have 5 minutes to prepare my final statement. And he said, oh, very well, Mr. Lockwood. Okay. So all the officers on that board cleared the room. And I sat there thinking, I said, okay, I'm in a doom loop. You know what a doom loop is? You're caught in a mess.
Yeah, no matter what, you're screwed.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I knew that even if I survived that board and they kept me in,
it would tend to you forever.
well, it would. Worse yet, there was another peer rating session coming up in just a couple of weeks. They would have peered. Everybody in the company knew that I was going through a board, so they would peer rated me down at the bottom again, and I'd be put back in the cycle of Category 1 board, Category 2, and I would be stuck in that cycle until they finally kicked me out. And so I said, no. The difficult decision was, but if I resign now, break the cycle, I get out, I don't have it on my record, I can then go and down to, basically go back into ROTC. I didn't have quite a clear picture yet, but I had a pretty good idea. But I can wipe the slate clean, start over. And so when they came back in, I addressed the board and I said,
"Sir, by the way."
No, I said, I have reviewed the evidence and the testimony of the past 9 hours, and I have concluded that it is no longer in my interest to continue. I am therefore exercising my option under regulation to resign. And the colonel in charge of that board, he practically dropped his teeth.
He was shocked.
He was shocked. He said, no one has ever done this before. And I said,
because they're not smart.
I said, nope. I said, nevertheless, my attorney tells me that is my option under regulation. And they agreed, and they said they let me resign, no problem. I discovered subsequently that they closed that loophole. No one else would ever be able. They would, all subsequent cadets, they appeared before.
You opened the black hole that when you went through it, they closed it.
I went through it and I shut it behind me because they would never allow anyone else to ever do that to them again. And but it was a difficult decision, but the right one.
Yeah, smart one, yeah.
And I got out of there.
Because you took back control of the direction of your life, because right there, you knew you were in a loop, that they were going to drag you through this for a while for nothing at the end of everything. That there was no winning.
There was no point in continuing.
So let's just get off this track right now.
Exactly right.
Wow.
Exactly right. Took back control. And again, that was the most difficult because I enjoyed, interestingly enough, as hard as it was, I enjoyed being at West Point. And but it was because I did not recognize yet that I was essentially an unalterable nonconformist. And that was because of the fact that I had Asperger's syndrome, which again, I did not know. I had no idea what I was at that point. And so, but it was very interesting. So yeah, that would be the most difficult decision.
Wow.
One of the easiest, marrying my wife, Kathleen. No brainer.
That's the perfect answer for your wife, for sure. Your book.
She knew all. All about my history.
Your book, The Russian View of a U.S. Strategy, offers a unique perspective. How did the writing of this book challenge or reshape your understanding of U.S. foreign policy, especially regarding Russia?
Well, because it showed what the Russians viewed as their main means of leverage over U.S. foreign policy. The key thing is that the Russians have viewed, during the Cold War as well as up to the present time, they have viewed their nuclear missile arsenal as being their primary means of leverage, forcing the United States to adapt to their foreign policy goals. They did it during the Cold War, but Ronald Reagan's introduction of SDI thwarted that objective and panicked them, really. During the post-Cold War period, even, the Russians still view their nuclear missile arsenal as being not only their symbol of great power status, but it is also their primary means of leverage over the United States in particular and over the West in general. And you've seen during this Russian-Ukrainian war how often, practically constantly, the Russians are threatening to escalate to the nuclear arsenal. They try to put vivid pictures of, they're trying to play on the Western fear of nuclear escalation. They're trying to do that to force a peace on their terms.
Yeah, that's it, to win.
They're trying to win. They do not believe in compromise. Now, by the way, the Russians technically have a word for compromise. They borrowed it from English. Okay, they borrowed our word compromise, put Cyrillic letters in it, compromise. Say, okay, but when you think of compromise from an American
Is I give you something, you give me back something, quite equal.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. You are, in effect, when Americans talk about compromise, they are meeting the other person halfway. Both sides gain something.
Not
When
them.
when the Russians translate compromise, the Russian translation of compromise is mutual surrender. Both sides lose something.
They have nothing. Both sides have nothing.
It's a negative connotation. The Russians hate compromise.
Imagine that's only one word. So imagine the differential in the two places.
You see how difficult it is to negotiate with it. It shows you how difficult it is to negotiate.
One word like that. Wow.
President Trump is finding that out, and he said because the Russians are insisting on essentially what amounts to unconditional surrender.
Mm-hmm.
They are insisting on that. And that's their idea of negotiation. So now, so the European Union understands this. So they're saying they're going to continue unless Russia withdraws from Ukraine, all of Ukraine, including the Crimea. The European Union is saying the sanctions will continue. Okay, they've just told Russia, stuff it. And now the United States, President Trump is getting more and more ticked off at the Russians for refusing to agree to a ceasefire because he wants to have a good deal. And the Russians were refusing to give it to him. So President Trump has been saying, in effect, at one point he said, we can do this the easy way or we can do this the hard way. And apparently the Russians are insisting on doing it the hard way. And so that is what President Trump is going to end up giving them, a really hard deal. And also, you notice with his tariffs, President Trump just not a short time ago declared that he was prepared to raise tariffs on China to 100%. Oh, yeah. He says, okay, you don't want to do it. And he's threatening to cut off talks with the Chinese and just raise the tariffs and say, okay, come back when you're willing to be reasonable. So this is a president that is launched on a very decisive course of action. And in this, I would say that his Golden Dome objective, in private, the Russians are probably panicking because if the Trump administration follows through correctly, and in particular follows through on the course of action that I will be recommending, then they have a means of neutralizing Russia's great power status, and that terrifies them more than anything else.
For sure, because after when we tell them to cease fire, they fucking will. That's the difference. They're without putting our people in danger and going down there.
Right. Yeah. The motto, by the way, that you'll like the motto that I use for wisdom, the Worldwide Strategic Defense Matrix, which is what I recommend in the Russian view of U.S. strategy. I first recommended it back in 1993. Wisdom, Worldwide Strategic Defense Matrix. It supplants the old doctrine of mutually assured destruction, MAD.
MAD.
Yeah. That's the paradigm that the Biden administration was operating under. And now with wisdom, my motto for wisdom is wisdom does not kill.
Exactly.
And it doesn't. It simply neutralizes the nuclear weapons of our adversaries. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, President Trump says that he wants to abolish nuclear weapons. Well, with wisdom, you can do that. And with the other thing is, if you adopt that type of strategy, then you do not need to spend any more money building more or better nuclear weapons. It's counterproductive. It doesn't affect the other side's view. You don't build any more nuclear weapons. You build that Golden Dome. You neutralize their nuclear weapons. And that's the right way to go.
Well, they say in certain sports, like the best offense is the best defense there. Because if the other buddy can't score, they can't win. So if they can't hurt you, they can't really win. So you just take out their offense. And by taking out their offense, you don't need to go on offense yourself and risk people.
Yeah. Well, basically, with wisdom, with a worldwide strategic defense matrix, which would be the central pillar of the Golden Dome, then once you have neutralized the nuclear weapons of Russia, China, and North Korea, what else do they have to threaten you with? Well, pretty much nothing.
Not much. So let's do this uncomfortable truth section. Tell us an uncomfortable truth of being an intelligence officer. And they don't need to be long answers. You can answer shortly if
Oh,
you
the
want.
uncomfortable truth of being an intelligence officer?
Yeah.
Well, for one thing, you can't talk about what you do. No, you
That's so true.
can't talk with your, well, look at the classified stuff that I went through.
Exactly.
No, you have to seal off a portion of your thoughts and your brain. And you people who talk about their, if you have people that talk about their intelligence careers on social media, they are fools
For sure.
because they are making you. If you do that, you are making yourself a target for foreign espionage and everything
And for
else.
your own country as well.
Yes. So, and yeah, your own country might want to arrest you. So so what you have to do is, as an intelligence officer, you have to be prepared to keep secrets for life.
Live in secrecy of career.
Live in secrecy of career. Don't talk about your job. Don't talk about what you're doing that day or to anyone who does not have a need to know. Who is not part of your office, who is not part of your circle. And you can confine that. You have to seal off that portion of your life from the rest of the world. And if you don't, you are running a big risk.
What's the hardest truth you realized in your life or career?
The hardest truth that I realized in my life and career was actually told to me by a senior GS-15 in the Directorate of Combat when I first came on active duty at Fort Huachuca. His name was Edwin Moses. How prophetic. Edwin Moses, fine gentleman, GS-15 or GS-15. He was a deputy there in combat developments, and he told me, Jonathan, your career is going to be interesting to watch, but dangerous to emulate. He was right.
And in retrospect, you realize how true that was.
Yeah. When you're an officer, well, especially as young as I was, and different from everyone else, let me tell you how different. When I was a captain, again at Fort Huachuca, another lieutenant colonel from the Office of Deputy Chief of Staff Intelligence in Washington, D.C., there was the commanding 3-star in charge of it then, Lieutenant General Odom, was he had sent this lieutenant colonel out on various jobs. But one of them, he met me in the hallway of our bachelor officers' quarters, and he told me, he says, that Lieutenant General Odom had assigned him as one of his additional duties, keeping track of the Soviet area studies PhDs in the Army. Okay? He said at that time, when he was speaking to me, there were 7 Soviet area studies PhDs in the Army.
Okay, well.
7. I was one, and so was Lieutenant General Odom. He's 2 of the 7, okay? He says, of those 7 Soviet area studies PhDs, 2 have published books. I was one. Lieutenant General Odom was the other. Wow. So that put me in very exclusive company.
Absolutely.
But it was an uncomfortable truth that made me essentially different from every other officer in the Army. And it's in effect almost the ultimate nonconformist.
What's the most uncomfortable moral dilemma that you had to face?
As far as a moral dilemma, you do not. Intelligence officers, one thing that intelligence officers never should try to become, they should never try to become famous.
For sure.
Because Benjamin Franklin had an interesting saying about intelligence, about keeping secrets. He said that 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead.
Yeah. That's the song at the beginning of Pretty Little Liars, but they say it with 2 people. The only reason a secret could be kept by 2 people is one of them is dead.
And I know you won't tell what I said, 'cause 2 can keep a secret if one of them is dead.
They were borrowing from Benjamin Franklin.
See, I didn't even know that. Man, that is incredible. And the two last ones of uncomfortable truths. What's something about the intelligence community that you feel could be better understood or improved? You find?
Well, I would encourage the intelligence community to learn to understand the perceptions of other nations. Other nations are not our friends. They need to, but they have agendas. They have things they want to know about us, and again, they're always trying to find out what our way of doing things is. And so, basically, intelligence officers should always try to study the history and the culture and the thinking of other nations.
Of both sides.
On both sides.
You have to really get the grasp of it.
You're trying, because one of the biggest faults of that the U.S. intelligence community, to its credit, tries to avoid is the analytical flaw that I call mirror imaging. Mirror imaging is projecting your own thinking onto the other side and assuming that they see that they think that's the same way you do.
Yeah, exactly.
And Americans are egregiously guilty of this.
Absolutely.
But one of the things that I discovered in the Russian view of U.S. strategy and in my doctoral dissertation, the Russians also mirror image and project their thinking.
Yeah.
They assume that other nations take the same attitude towards international affairs that they do.
Mm-hmm. That is so true. And
but the consequences of this are different for both sides.
For sure. It's different repercussions to not knowing the full truth there. And what's an aspect of intelligent work that you believe that is misrepresented in movies or by the media of intelligence work?
That's easy.
Go ahead.
That's it. The misrepresentation is that if you tell people that you're in intelligence work or that you are in the intelligence community, everyone assumes that you're a spy.
That's so true. That's so true.
They all think you live a James Bond type of experience.
Yeah, double life, perfect.
Yeah, that you've got this double life, the secret life that that you don't dare reveal to anyone else. And and the thing that the U.S. Army prizes in its intelligence officers are supposed to look like, act like, and be like everyone else. Mm-hmm. You don't see a person on the street say, "There goes an intelligence officer." Yeah. Really.
Or that guy's dressed as an intelligence officer.
Yeah,
for sure not.
Oh yeah, we had, and people that had a problem with this. We used to have people in the counterintelligence course, officers in the counter. You could always spot who the counterintelligence students were. Because they were the ones dressed in these three-piece suits and ties.
Like Men in Black.
They look like something almost like a caricature of Men in Black. Oh yeah, there's a counterintelligence.
For sure.
Here's the latest batch, and so people intelligence personnel basically have to learn how to blend in, not to be obtrusive, not to be remarkable in any way.
Yeah. And you pass under the radar there.
Yeah, you fly under the radar.
Because your life and career is under the radar.
Right.
And
then that's the main misunderstanding about people who work in the intelligence community. They like to they like to follow the French saying, "Live happily, live hidden."
Exactly, and safely, people. So
happily, live hidden.
So thank you, Jonathan, to come on the show. Where can everybody find you? Do you have any socials that we can find you on, and where can we buy those books? Because
I have been a career intelligence professional, my practice has been to eschew interacting visibly on social media. It's just an ingrained habit. It's much safer that way. And so the less obtrusive I am, the happier I am. But I don't mind coming on podcasts like this and talking about certain things. So basically, if they want, they can certainly get an idea of the way I think by, the book, the Lockwood Analytical Method for Prediction, and the Russian View of U.S. Strategy, either of those. And they are also not just available in hardback or paperback, but also in ebook format. So just in case, so that's good. That's a nice little development. So anyway, let's see. My goodness, how time has flown.
Yeah, it flew a lot. So I really appreciate you taking the time and coming on and telling us your story and career. So next time we have you on, at least we have your whole career packed up in one. And I'll
Any
keep
questions about Dr. Lockwood? See last exciting episode.
Exactly. So thanks again for coming on, and guys, have a great weekend.